Recording in progress.
All right, thank you everyone for joining our session today. We are talking about keeping bookings, billings, and RevRec all in one place. Between Jagan and I'm Jen Meehan, the Chief Growth Officer at Neocol. I started the revenue automation practice at Neocol 3 years ago. And Jagan Reddy, do you want to give a little bit about your extensive background?
Yeah, sure. Jagan Reddy, I'm the CEO founder at RightRev. Prior to this, I founded RevPro, which is now part of another company. And my history, like my career, started with implementing ERPs. Have worked with the finance systems for almost 20 years, and have an extensive experience in the overall finance and revenue recognition.
Extensive.
Yeah.
Some might even say you're the godfather of RevRec. I believe I saw that in print.
I'm honored.
And between the two of us, we've seen sort of an evolution of RevRec over the years, over the last decade and a half, 2 decades. I was a revenue manager at EMC for a while back when everything was perpetual software, and RevRec looked a lot different, billing looked a lot different. We've seen a lot of changes. I'm sure you've seen probably the most changes of anyone.
And we have seen a lot more changes in the last 10 years than we ever seen in the last 100 years, I would say, on the accounting. I was part of Juniper Networks supporting the finance team, and the business models were changing at Juniper, right? And then they had to automate because everything was super manual, super complex, and we looked at the market, and there was nothing that can really solve the problem. So we have seen huge amount of issues and the changes that we've come across.
Yep. And when I was at EMC, when I first got there, everything was in spreadsheets. We had SAP. We didn't really have SAP. Every time they upgraded it, the RevRec downgraded, and we were in spreadsheets, and it was kind of a nightmare. And then your first product came along, and it was incredible. And then your second product came along, and it was absolutely life-changing. But before that, to the topic of today, we were managing bookings in one very separate place, and actually many different places. We were managing billings in many different places across many different functions, and then we were managing RevRec in many different places across many different functions, and it broke down in so many different places. So do you want to speak a little bit to your experience about when companies are managing bookings, billings, and RevRec in different places, like how that does break down?
Yeah, I think the overall unifying all the processes together started with ERP, where they're trying to bring things together. But then as the business evolves, they're not able to keep up with the business requirements and demands on how to automate. Slowly we saw like everything start disintegrating, and the teams going for best-in-breed solutions for managing all this, without thinking what is going to be a huge impact on managing all this, where the data is going to be there. So we slowly saw like everybody using point solutions to handle their CPQ and bookings in one system, billing something separate, and then RevRec in another one. Now, when this starts happening, now everything is disintegrated, and once again you're using so many different integration tools to make the data flow across all the systems. And then everybody's looking at it from a high level, things are happening, but nobody's looking beneath all this to see how many human resources are working behind this, how much effort is being made to ensure all the data is moving across correctly, all the system. It's a disaster almost everywhere.
Yep. And you speak to integrations. At EMC, at most of the different varying points, we didn't even have integrations between the two. It was a handoff of a spreadsheet from one team to the next. And as you can imagine, that involves a lot of resources, a lot of people. It also creates a lot of data inconsistencies and a lot of errors. It really impacts the day-to-day. And I remember even like if you just sort of tunnel dive into one of those resources, I remember working on a spreadsheet, and I had to group, essentially, as you know, ASC 606 today, I had to group various orders into one revenue contract. And it was so manual. And I was like, I have a college degree so that I can like almost play highlights, like what belongs together. It was silly. And there's just better ways. So in your experience, how do those, that's going to result in data consistencies and errors, right? Because you have not just one person, but you have multiple resources doing all of these manual connecting the dots and manual calculations. So how does that impact business operations in general from your perspective?
I mean, you give a great example how businesses are handing over the data from one team to another team, one process to another process, all that. An example that I want to give you is we are in a when I was working at Juniper, we are in a quarter end meeting with the CFO and everyone, and then we're looking at how much did the sales book this quarter, and let's assume I'm just giving an arbitrary number here. It says they said we booked $100 million, and then we're looking at the billing and say, why didn't we bill 100 million? If we booked 100 million, why are we not billing 100 million? And then we see there's a disconnect in the data. The data didn't come into the billing system. And then now you look at revenue, that's even more disaster because everything is not accounted for in revenue because the data didn't flow through into every system. So we started thinking like, how do we resolve this, right? Like how do we handle this kind of issues? Then you end up putting more headcounts to handle all this, more automation, more integration, all of this. So I think this is where it has been causing problems for these teams to understand how do I keep the data together and then work on one system rather than breaking it down. And it's not only we're talking about integration and reconciliation, but in many cases, it even becomes impossible for the silo systems to even operate upon. So, for example, if an order is booked for $1 million, and then somebody comes in and adjusts it to a 900K, they downsize the order. If the billing system doesn't have right visibility, it doesn't know how to assume like your billing is going quarterly or it's a multi-year contract, you're billing annual. It doesn't know what is the total adjusted contract amount and how much you have to bill. So you're even stopping your other silo systems to work properly. So it's losing all that data. That's what we're seeing.
And that's a bad customer experience too. So if I downgraded, I would expect to receive a lower invoice the next quarter. If those two things are not connected, like now you're impacting the customer, which really impacts the business. But you also mentioned the CFO earlier. And so you're in the room with the CFO. What is the impact, the financial impact to, let's say, either delayed, like I don't have my financial numbers in time because I have 20, 30 people running the billings. And then after those 20, 30 people run the billings, now RevRec can do their job, but they have to wait for billings to be done. The CFO wants to know the RevRec numbers, right? That's what they need to report to their stakeholders. So whether it's just delayed financials or even inaccurate financials because, hey, billings didn't get that downgrade, neither did RevRec. So what are the impacts to the CFO on that?
I mean, it's a great question. I have a great, amazing example for this. But before I get into this, a lot of people think my booking is my revenue, which is completely incorrect in today's world, right? Bookings is no more revenue. To get to the revenue number, there's a lot of things you need to go to your revenue rule book. You need to understand when you can take the revenue. Have you delivered your performance obligation? There's so many things to get to the revenue number, but still in a lot of people's mind, they think booking is revenue, especially the sales team thinks booking is revenue. So I booked it, I'm done, you got the revenue. So the example I want to give you is one of the technology company was using our product before, and they are in their quarter end the last day, and they have promised Street a number that will be the forecast for this quarter. And they talk to the sales team and say, okay, if we book another $1 million, we will achieve our number for the quarter. Great. Sales team booked $1 million, and then the CFO was told, we have booked $1 million, we are good with the number, you can be happy to report to the street. And guess what? In few hours, that data comes into the revenue system. The revenue system calculates everything and say, you can only take $500,000 revenue on this deal. And the CFO was like super highly surprised, like how can that be? So this is the disconnect. There's a lot of finance teams and sales teams have a disconnect. They don't understand what is the actual revenue you can generate from a contract. They blindly think if I book, it's a revenue. This is where the disconnect with systems. If the CFO was told after this deal was put through a revenue system to analyze what is the expected revenue to take, it would have been much more insightful. So this is where a connected system with a connected processes all under one place is a huge benefit to the financial team.
So Essentially, if you have siloed systems who are running your bookings, your sales team, your billings, your invoice team, and your RevRec team, of course, if the systems are different, the people aren't going to understand the impact either. How would they? They don't have the downstream data. They only have the upstream data, or they don't get the downstream data until the upstream data, it's several hours, days, or weeks later. There's no connecting the system, so there's no connecting the functions. So how does a single source of truth, a single system help with not just the data inaccuracies and the inefficiencies, but how do you see it helping across functions as well?
So this is another great question where if you look at the entire quote to cash processes, almost everything starts with your CPQ, CRM, where you're generating a code and generating everything, and that flows into order management. So if you look at order management, for order management, the only source of data that's coming in is CPQ, where it's coming in. And then for the billing, it's coming from the order management. That's the primary source. But if you look at a revenue system, if you look 25 years back, for a revenue system, billing is the only source of information because when you bill, you recognize revenue. But the last 15 years, everything has changed. In today's world, revenue system is connected almost from your CPQ all the way to your cash collections. Not even your billing, you go beyond. You embed within your CPQ, you embed within your order management, you're embedding within your fulfillment process, you're embedding within billing, and then you're not stopping there. You're still embedding with your cash collections. Just look at the breadth of the systems that a revenue tool needs to connect. It's huge. It's end to end. It's no more the ultimate end receiver of the data, but it's constantly monitoring a particular contract throughout its life cycle. Now, how can a system like this can operate in silo without being on a single platform, on a single source of truth? It's constantly receiving incorrect data. So a lot of people have to be educated on this, like what a revenue accounting system means in today's world of business.
Yeah, and you said that word life cycle. It's the customer life cycle now. And it wasn't just the move to SaaS and subscriptions. It was also ASC 606 that required us to look at the whole life cycle, not as a singular point in time transaction, but how does the customer transact with the company over time? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the customer journey through a contract is more complex today compared to 20 years back. The reason is the businesses are offering flexible terms to the customer. You can upgrade, downgrade, cancel, you buy additional products. The contract keeps changing every time. It just doesn't stay in the same form. Now, the billing has to react to those changes, right? And then on top of that, the revenue system has to react to that. So every system downstream has to react to all of these changes. Now, the last 10 to 15 years, we all have been working hard to make the systems ready for the SaaS. And by the time we're getting ready now, suddenly all the business is moving into consumption. Now we are once again in the next generation of rebuilding everything to support this new consumption business model. And consumption business model brings another huge set of challenges. It's completely different challenges we're going through.
And it's going to keep changing. There'll be something that we don't even know exists yet that's the problem or the challenge in the next 5 to 10 years. So having a flexible solution, a flexible platform, and having your billings, at a minimum, your billing, your bookings, and your RevRec all in one place is super important.
I mean, the entire world is moving to AI, and how the AI is going to shape into a pricing model, packaging, and everything, we don't know. Everybody's trying out different models. Everybody's trying kind of a consumption business model right now. Will it be the same, or AIs are going to adopt something new? We don't know. And that's going to be another revolution happening in how we price, package, and do those business. It's going to be very different. So these point solutions or the best of breed solutions, ERP is not going to keep up with this high-speed train that's running, that's changing quickly everything. They're not going to keep up with this. We, the point solutions who are building the best of the breed, we need to keep up to make sure we can deliver value to our customers to automate all this. And we have to be on top of all these changes. We just can't sit behind.
And how do you see Salesforce Revenue Cloud specifically helping be that platform?
I mean, for me, it's kind of a dream come true what I've seen in the last 20 years. One of the biggest challenge for revenue recognition software is the data. The data has to be clean. The data has to be consistent. The data has to be connected. What I mean is you have an order, you have a billing, all this have to be connected properly. Now, every implementation that we have done in the last 20 years on the revenue recognition software, the primary reason for a failure of a project or a failure of giving a better user experience to a customer, everything has revolved around data issues, data inconsistency. Now, the reason I said dream come true is when we built Writer on the Salesforce platform for the Salesforce Cloud, we built integration with Salesforce and we understood Salesforce in and out, like how it works, everything. And we hooked on to that single source of truth on the Salesforce platform. Now we read data directly from that. We know how it operates. And then we are almost like a plug and play. We're not spending any more time when we implement for a Salesforce customer and doing data integrations. We don't need to worry about data quality. There's a lot of things you can automate using the Salesforce platform. So we are seeing an amazing successful implementation when we implement Writer along with Revenue Cloud on the Salesforce platform, because we are a hook to the single source of truth data that's sitting on the Revenue Cloud.
Absolutely, and I see it in our everyday at Neocol and the implementations we do, and it's fabulous. It truly is one platform. Do you have any customer examples that you'd be comfortable sharing with us on how they've been successful and what kind of results they achieved?
I mean, I'm not going to name a customer, but as an example, this particular company has been using Salesforce as a CPQ tool, and then they've been using another third-party solution for billing. And one of the biggest headache have been consistency on the data flow between the CPQ and the billing system. They were constantly missing to invoice the customer the right amount. There's delays. When credits come in, they don't know how to process it. It's been a nightmare on this. And then we were trying to implement Writer with that system. So we get the order data, we're happy, we processed it, it's very clean from Salesforce. Now the billing data coming from another system, the billing doesn't know to which order this belongs. We know the customer, but we don't know which order to belong. A revenue tool cannot operate without knowing all this data points. So even for a customer to do this on a spreadsheet, that become nightmare. Forget about automation. You can't even do this on a spreadsheet. Now, as part of our implementation, we really recommended them, like, why don't you look at Salesforce billing, because you're using CPQ, why can't you put billing so it's all single source of truth? And then our tool is plug and play. It's just going to work beautiful for you. So you have everything in one platform, your reconciliation. There's no reconciliation literally. Um, you will know if you missed invoicing something, you will know right there. If a revenue tool didn't pick up the transaction to process, you will know right there. You don't need to build anything, reconciliation system thing. So this customer made a switch, literally from a different billing tool into Revenue Cloud. So then now the Writer implementation also became super easy. And now they can see all their bookings, billings, revenue, all that information on one single record on a single platform. So beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like contract mods are a huge example of, if you don't have everything connected, how does the revenue team possibly drill back to like where this change came from? Or if you have a floating change, what revenue contract does this belong to? But it's also the right data model, right? If everything's on the same data model, then you know you're not going to have discrepancies with the upstream invoice amount and the downstream revenue amount. So we see that as well. Are there any other examples you can think of why it's so important to be able to drill back down from order to invoice to rev rec?
I'll give you a good example on a consumption business model. When you do a contract model on a consumption business model, you might be invoicing your customer based on how much they are consuming every month. There might be a contract value, but on top of that, you're invoicing customer every month on what they're using. Now, customer comes in for a renewal, or they've already consumed most of their services, they want to upgrade or buy more services. In a SaaS model, you may not even care about how much you have invoiced the customer. You will just go and renew the contract as it is. But in a consumption business model, you have to look at how much services is left out, they have not consumed. And then you also need to look out how much you have invoiced them so far. So now you're looking not only at the order data, you're looking at the billing data. And then you need to combine them, and we call it what we call it as a rollover contract, where you're rolling over all that amount into the new contract, because customer will not lose that value. They need all that in the new value. Now, when you roll over, there is also a deferred revenue balance on your revenue. You need to roll over that as well. So now look at like 3 systems are talking to each other when you do a simple contract mod, and all the systems should know like how much is booked, how much is consumed, how much is billed, how much is the deferred balance left over. You need to know every data point across all the systems to do this simple amendment. And the companies are doing thousands of amendments every day, and if these systems are not connected, you're not going to be able to automate any of this. You're not giving the right numbers to your customer, you're not renewing it right. So that's where having one data source connecting to the same platform is super important.
Well, that's such a good example. And consumption, we're seeing more and more. This also becomes such a nightmare for audit too. So it's not just, the CFO is having an issue where he or she is not getting their numbers in time, or, it's giving headaches to the RevRec team. The audit team comes in and they can't figure out where this came from or where that came from, which is going to increase the audit time, which is going to increase the audit, price. And it's just going to cost the company even more time and money because they have such siloed systems.
That's where the auditing teams that are auditing a system where all of them are on the same platform find it more easy. I'll give you, we will show it in a demo pretty shortly as well, where on one platform, you can easily go from an order and quickly see what are the billings that have happened. And on the same order, you can clearly see what is the revenue recognition that's happened. And you can drill between all the different transactions. So for auditing team, it's amazing. They can see all in one place. Otherwise, you're blindly downloading data from 3 or 4 systems, putting it in spreadsheet, and there is no real data, clean data that's coming into all this. So we have seen a huge audit experience changing when customers are using all this on the Revenue Cloud for POC.
Yeah. And I think that is a great segue to our demo with Andrew. He is going to show us a little bit of what we just discussed on the RightRev and Salesforce Revenue Cloud platform. Yeah.
So we're in our Salesforce demo org, and we're really going to highlight that single source of truth from living on the Salesforce platform, all the way from your quoting down to revenue recognition. So to start, I'm going to wear my sales hat, and we're going to jump into an opportunity and just show how this information really flows from kind of start to finish into RightRev. So within this opportunity, the salesperson has done a quote. We can see from this quote, we have all of our line items that have been generated. As this loads, it's going to show all of the different products and services that were added into this quote with all of our, that's not ideal there. So within this quote, we have all of our line items. We can see from our quote lines here as well. We have all of these different line items and the values and various sales metrics that have been associated. Once that quote has been approved and the opportunity has been closed, this will jump into our opportunity, or into our order, excuse me. So from here, I can jump into our order that was created from the quote. We can see all of that information that was associated to the quote. All of those quote lines have generated order products. Now, taking off our sales hat, we might have a deal desk team come in. They'll activate this order, and that's really what triggers RightRev to begin our automation process. So once that order has been activated, it is going to, in near real time, generate what we call a revenue contract in RightRev. So we can see from our order object, we can actually navigate into these revenue contract lines and jump into our revenue contract, which is RightRev. Within this object, we're pulling a lot of information from that order, including invoicing. So as those billings come through, as the accounting team that's doing that process and doing the invoicing generates invoices, again, in near real time, our revenue contract will update and we'll see those changes process within each of these objects. To start though, I just want to highlight what this revenue contract houses and all of the information that's available here. So within each of our revenue contracts, we're tracking some core metrics. So we can see our total contract value. So this is that total value that's been quoted from your order, from your quote. We can also pull in, like I mentioned, all of that invoicing that's happened up to date. So this is going to continuously update over time, month in, month out, as we continue to make changes and update those billing amounts. We're also going to track our revenue recognition. Obviously, that is the core of what RightRev's offering. So once we have all of this information, once we've released revenue, we've triggered all of these things, we then also process those revenue journal entries and post them into your ERP and track that revenue recognition for you. And then the last two metrics here on the right-hand side that we're focused on are our revenue planned and revenue unplanned. So as we ingest all of that information from upstream, we're able to process all of that through our revenue contract rules engine and assign specific treatment. And so as things like bookings, as billings, or any other event that you have that would trigger revenue, as those occur, we'll actually release revenue and move it from this revenue unplanned bucket into our revenue planned category. This essentially means we've satisfied a portion of that performance obligation or even all of that performance obligation, and we can begin recognizing revenue. On the counter side, we have that revenue unplanned, which would be a performance obligation where we're still waiting for some sort of event or invoicing or something to take place. So we're tracking all of that for you here in our revenue contract. And then kind of highlighting some of the additional functionality here. Once we have all of that information, everything we're doing is built on automation. We're trying to set up specific revenue recognition rules. If you have things like SSP, a standalone sales price that you need to apply to each line item, we have all of those things configured within the platform to automatically pull in and do those calculations for you. So as I kind of scroll down the right-hand side here, we can see we have some carves, as we call them. So this is that allocation that's taking place because of the SSP policies that were in play. So we're carving out $1,300 in this specific agreement. And as I kind of scroll up here back to our revenue contract lines, if I click in here, I can actually see the individual line item level detail of those carves. So we can see how much is actually being allocated from each of our line items. Additionally, from this section, I'm also able to jump back and forth. Again, the idea of this single source of truth, I can jump back and forth from our order to our revenue contract. I can go even a little bit more granular and jump into the specific order product IDs, the order products themselves. So we can always see that connection of the data between RightRev, between Salesforce CPQ, between Salesforce billing. Additionally, as I mentioned, all of our line items here have gone through a rules-based engine. We've had specific configurations set up to automate this process for us. And we can see each of our line items has a specific rule associated. So we can see which trigger is actually releasing revenue, whether it be bookings, whether it be something that's based on billings, or even, like I mentioned, the idea of an event-based recognition, which allows us to release and trigger revenue recognition on any number of events that you can determine, whether that's the services being performed, whether it's a percentage of completion, really you name it, we can configure it and set it up in the platform. Once all of that's completed, once we've done that automation, the next step of the process for us is then to actually run our revenue recognition journal entries. And so all of that will be done within RightRev, within Salesforce, to post those journal entries for you, and then have all of that information here within this platform, within the reporting tools that are available, to give you all of your information that you need on a month in, month out basis. With that being said, additional reporting is available from each of these individual revenue contracts. We're going to have specific detail here around your revenue contract waterfalls. So we're doing all of those reports for you. We have everything pre-built. We'll track the revenue recognition for each of these line items, all of that planned revenue, so we can see kind of the future forecasting of all of those triggered revenue recognition items. So again, we have all of that information available. We have additional reports here on the contract itself. We also have all of these reports as well as many others available within the standard Salesforce reporting tools. And it allows you to not only layer in our revenue contract metrics that we've calculated, you can also pull in all of that upstream data that previously was disconnected. So you can pull in variables that you might not be able to get in other solutions, where in RightRev, we have all of that information at our disposal, and we can kind of do all of that reporting for you, satisfy a lot of those audit requirements, and ultimately meet all of your revenue contract and revenue needs. So today, that's really all I wanted to show. We just wanted to give a brief introduction to the platform. Obviously, there's so much more. It's a very vast platform, able to handle the most complex of revenue scenarios. So with that, Jen, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
And thank you for that wonderful demo, Andrew, tying it all together for us. Any questions from the crowd? All right. Thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed our session.